Hello and welcome to ScotDance USA's World Champion Dancers and Teachers interview series. I'm Emma Schiff. The Professional Development Committee at ScotDance USA wants to help the Highland dancing world stay motivated during these challenging times. That's why we're talking to the best of the best, World Champion dancers and their teachers. We'll learn about how they achieved what they did, plus their advice for dancers and teachers struggling during quarantine. We hope these videos can bring you inspiration. Enjoy.
Hi, my name is Natalie Foley, and on behalf of ScotDance USA Professional Development Committee, we are going to be interviewing Linda Armstrong and Emma Schiff. So welcome both of you. Thank you for joining us. We really wanted to focus on providing inspiration to the dancers around the world. Given COVID, no championships in 2020, we want to make sure that we're still providing them with some inspiration to keep going and keep working towards their goals. In addition, we wanted to share some great tips from teachers of world champions. So Linda, let's start with you for your first question.
Okay.
What do you do to help your dancers build strength?
I suggest that the kids start jump roping first, and they get a jump rope. It's lots of fun. Start at 1 minute, build it up to maybe 1.5 minutes, then to 2 minutes. Fast and not stopping. They don't get to do the extra jump in the middle. It's got to go fast like a boxer or a skater, or lots of them use jump roping for warming up. So I think it's good to get the heart rate going, getting a good sweat on, and it builds stamina. And if you can get up to 2 minutes to 3 minutes, which sounds easy, it's not. That's about the average of what a dance would be, 2 minutes, maybe 2.5 minutes. So if you can jump rope for that long, then you can get through a dance pretty decently.
What did you do to practice perfecting your technique?
Mainly going through steps, was working on technique, and then going through dances with stamina. In lessons, it was always more getting my corrections. We didn't spend as much time really just working on technique for a whole class. I would get my corrections, and then it was my job to go fix them before my next lesson. So it was mainly at home, just still doing my dances through, but also spending more time working on steps or working on just movements.
And Linda, what's your main focus during class with the dancers? How much time do you spend on technique versus having them dance through the full dance?
I think technique is the most important thing. So we spend it on technique, but and going over it. I don't want to see 45 shuffles. It would be nice to see 45 beautiful shuffles. That would be great. But I just make sure that when we go over the technique, they've got it correct, and then they need to go home and practice it. I don't want to practice with them. I want to give a lesson to them and give them their, yes, that's looking better. No, that's not. You need more work on that. That's what I think a lesson should be. And then if they're stuck, of course, you try to make sure that they've got it right before they go home and practice it wrong for another few days or a week or whatever. So you want to make sure that they understand you and what the correction should be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as a parent of one of your dancers,
Yeah.
I think you should share also the expectation that you have for the parents during lessons.
It's an important triangle to have the parent in on I think it's important for them to be there for the lesson so they know exactly what is expected of the dancer. But it takes, 3 people, the teacher, the dancer, and the parent. And if you don't have that triangle, then it's hard. It's harder if you don't have all 3 in it 100%.
Emma, what did you do to keep committed to practicing?
When I was younger, that was having the parent involved. When I was younger, I was not great about practicing, and it required mainly my mom yelling at me or taking away competitions. And then once I got older, I think especially after like 3 or 4 months of dancing with Linda, I got really good at practicing on my own. And then from then on, I didn't have my mom involved at all with practicing. It just became more, I wasn't doing as well as I wanted to. My stamina was really not great when I was younger, and it made practicing not enjoyable. Doing the dances wasn't fun because I was struggling. once I really got on to my stamina and got it good enough, I actually was starting to enjoy dances. It was fun. It wasn't just painful and trying to get through it. I actually felt good about what I was doing, and that made it more enjoyable.
At what moment did you know that you had a chance at a world championship title?
In 2014, I came third, and that was really surprising because I'd never placed, or maybe the year before, I think I got one placing. I think I got a fourth in the fling, but it had taken me 3 years of going to even qualify. So I didn't think until I came third that I ever had a shot of winning. And then the next year I came third again. So then by the next year I would be 17 in the juniors. So a bit of an advantage. So I thought, you know, I might have a chance that year.
Why don't you share the struggle that you had that year?
So that year was not what I had expected because I knew I had a shot at winning. Championships were going really well up until late April. And then at the Sacramento championship, I just landed wrong coming out of high cuts in the sword and ended up breaking my foot. And that was pretty devastating. It was really difficult, but the doctor said it would be healed by June. So I knew that would at least give me 2 months of practicing. And that's why I went down and stayed at Linda's for a while. And it was really difficult because some days you would have great practices and I'd be like, I can do this, I can compete there. And then some days I'd be like, oh, I don't think I compete at all. And I went to Canadians, ended up not competing because I wasn't strong enough. Managed to compete the next weekend at USIR, and I came, I think, fourth. And then we just worked really, really hard the next 3 weeks until Cowell. When we were in Scotland that year for 3 weeks, it was pulling out of competitions, doing others, practicing one day, not being able to practice the next. And then by the time we got to Cowell, I had just been all over the place. I think Butte was the first championship I had won since I broke my foot, but there wasn't any pressure. No one expected me to win. So I actually just went out at Cowell and enjoyed dancing, and I wasn't a nervous wreck like sometimes I am. And it ended up working out all right.
Absolutely. How did you feel when you realized that you had won?
I didn't really realize until they called my name. You know, they line you up backstage and they called the line and they said my name last and they were all like, congrats. And I was like, wow.
It was an up and down. After April, it was up one day and down the next, and up one day and down the next. So it was a roller coaster ride for both of us, you know, never knowing what was, you know, even if she was even going to go at that point. Mm-hmm. So when we were over in Scotland, that wasn't easy either because it was just not easy. You know, as a teacher, you just trying to keep their, support them. But I didn't want her to get injured more. I wanted to support whatever she wanted to do. And if she felt like dancing, that was great. But, you know, the emotional part of it is the worst part because, you know, you want them strong and you don't want them emotional while they're dancing. You want them focused on their dancing. So I said, well, at this point, you don't have anything to lose. You're here. You might as well just do it. Do your best. That's all you can do and see what happens. And, you know, when you push through, I mean, it was every dance was a big push to get through it. You know, especially after the sword, you know, sword's always the critical one. And, but I thought, you know, if she places, that's great. Not in my wildest dreams did I think she was going to win worlds. I didn't think that, not that year of all the years. So it was a big surprise.
And that year you had Erin and Emma.
Yes. Yes. So when you're doing the results, you get the, you know, juvenile results first. Okay. So you're kind of getting over that, you know, excitement. And then you start the next group. And then, so you're still kind of thinking about what just happened. And then you're still trying to write the results down and your hands are shaking and all that. And then you're trying to add up the scores, which you can't add up when you're, you know, and so I really wasn't sure either that if she had it or not. So then when she got that, it was super excitement. I couldn't believe it. It was kind of unreal, you know, especially to have two.
Because Erin had one on a tie and they didn't break. I think now they do break it because it's kind of mean for the dancers to have to wait for all the other results to learn, but they didn't do it back then. So Erin after they finished her results, she had no clue if she had won because it was a
Oh,
tie.
not the year. I don't remember. I can't remember.
And then I came off and wasn't sure. And I remember when I got backstage to the other side where the juveniles were, I was like, did you win? She was like, I don't know. Did you? I was like, I don't know. So we were both, so I can imagine it would have been more, you're in the stands like, do I have 2 world champions?
I was watching it on the live stream, and there was chats on the side of the live stream. And I remember I was sitting there with my pen and paper, and I calculated it and literally burst into tears when I realized that you had won, because I remember sitting beside your mom. Literally, her head was buried in my arms watching your sword at USIR, because she knew you were so scared to do your sword there because it was the first time. And I obviously were friends, so I watched what you had gone through, and I mean, I'm even tearing up just thinking about what you accomplished that year. It was phenomenal, like overcoming the fear of doing the sword when, like that April you had broken your foot, and then getting all the way and overcoming just that emotional fear of what's going to happen if I get up and do the sword, and I push myself to the absolute limit. So I remember calculating it and texting Linda going, I think Emma won. And so, yeah, it was pretty amazing, I think, just for everyone to watch how well you did in pulling it off.
Thank you.
Emma and I were actually trying to calculate, Linda. I think you have had a world champion for 7 years straight. Is that correct?
I think you might be right. Yes.
7 years straight. And 4 girls. Absolutely amazing. And not many teachers, I don't know if any teachers, I don't know what the stats are, but not many teachers can accomplish something like that. What do you think that you do differently that can get girls to that level?
That's a hard question. I explained to them, at the beginning what I expect out of them. It's up to them whether they follow what I suggest for practicing and just before a competition and after a competition and during a competition. And, it's a partnership. It's a tight partnership, I think. And, they've got to follow the rules, so to speak, or follow what I'm saying. And I don't exactly know how it works, how they think about it. It's, if they work hard, if you practice and you work hard, there's going to be a payoff at the end of it. Now, whatever that payoff is, it could be whatever your goal has been set. Some kids, maybe it's just getting to qualify to go to the US Championship. And some kids go right to the top and they want a world championship. So it depends on the kid too, on the dancer, how much work they want to put in. But I'll work just as hard as they do and try to figure out, what the next step is and what dance they need to work on. And so, I work just as hard as they do.
Emma, what do you think Linda does that kind of separates her from the rest?
Linda has a sixth sense. I think Linda has a sixth sense for knowing exactly when to push people. I think a lot of times in classes, people will get out of things really easily. And we feel like real, like Olympic athletes because we all come in our leotards and shorts and white knee socks and we wear our hair in a bun. And it feels like it's not just dancing around. If you don't want to wear a shoe, you don't need to wear a shoe. And it makes you really feel like you're training for something. And also, you do what Linda asks you to do. It's not, I'm sore today. Let's take it easy. She knows like when it's actually an injury and you're at risk of hurting yourself versus when it's just you need to be pushed that day. And that's something that I think I don't see that often in teachers, is that she knows really how hard to push you, and she just trains differently. It feels like we're doing something, even if Highland dancing isn't the best known sport in the world, it kind of feels like we are these high level athletes of this very important sport. And it puts you in a different mindset that it really makes you want to work hard, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Just watching Linda teach, I can see that too. it's almost like you don't want to disappoint her either. Like you don't, or yourself, like you want to push yourself.
And it's not to say it's not fun and like it's completely 100% serious and there's no laughing ever in class or anything like that, but it is a lot of hard work. If you tell Linda though you're wanting to compete at the US or the world level, then your classes are going to look how they should look for competing at a high level.
That was a very good answer.
It wasn't offensive.
Linda, what is your fondest memory as a teacher?
My fondest memory, one of my early memories, is that I got a student who had been taking from another teacher for a couple of years. And she was older, you know, like 11, 12. And she said that, you know, she wanted to switch teachers. She wanted to do better. She wanted to win something. She had gone to several competitions, never won anything. So I said, okay, well, what's the next competition you want to do? And this was like in May, and her first competition she wanted to do was in Santa Rosa. This is when it was still in Santa Rosa. I said, okay. So we focused on the fling. That was about the only dance we focused on. She couldn't hear the timing. It was a mess. There was no timing. That was her main thing. She couldn't hear the music. So we worked for like 3 months on just the fling, focusing on that. We did the other dances, and she was in beginner. And so her mom and her grandma drove her up to Santa Rosa, and she did her dances, and she won like a 5th place in the fling. And you had thought that that was the world championship. That mom and that grandma and that little kid were so excited. And it just kind of woke me up and thought, oh, you know, just a little thing like that. It was amazing. And then and then it was like a complete turnaround and ended up being, you know, one of the reps for the USIR later in years. So you just never know, you know, with these kids. That's like my first kind of memory of trying to get somebody accomplished to get up there and dance and be confident. My other memories are, of course, I mean, the World Championships. You can't, I mean, every single one of them is different. Every single one of it's a surprise and wonderful, and, you know, and you don't take it for granted ever, because, you know, the next year, you know, you might not have a champion. So, and I think the other highlights have been when we were asked to go back, when Erin and Emma and Marielle and I were asked to go back for the BATD conference, and they did the choreography for the conference, and that was in June. So going to Scotland in June was unusual, and performing there and lecturing there was, you know, a highlight. And I think one of the other highlights was when Erin won the Oscars. And we went back to Scotland in November and she won an Oscar. I don't think no US dancer has ever, I don't know if anybody outside of Scotland has ever won it before. So that was a huge highlight and a lot of fun, and a fun weekend.
Emma, what was your routine like the day before and the day of championships?
Typically the day before, I don't do a big practice. I would do just working on corrections, not doing full dances or anything like that. And then just a lot of icing and icy hot and soaking the legs in Epsom salts and stuff. And then the morning of, trying to make myself eat a full breakfast, trying to make myself down some Advil, and then getting to a competition. I always had an iPod with music, because if I just start talking to everybody, I will just start talking a million miles an hour and get very distracted, and just out of nerves. Mainly for me, competitions was always just trying to get my nerves under control. And that really came also with a lot of working and practicing. The more I practiced, the better I felt about my dancing, the less things I had to worry about. When I started with Linda, I was so nervous every time I went up for the sword, because I probably kicked it more than half the times I went up in a year to do it. And we worked on the sword, I think, more than anything else going into Scotland that year. And I don't think I've actually kicked it since then. And I stopped being nervous after, you know, a few competitions of kicking it, because didn't happen in practice anymore, and I didn't worry about it happening there. So mainly just feeling good about my dancing from the right amount of practicing, which helped my nerves.
And Linda, what's your routine look like for your dancers when you're at championships?
Well, normally I don't see them for a practice the day before. If we're in Scotland, we have lessons prior to that, but the day before the lesson or before the competition, I don't see them. I said, you can text me if you want to talk about something, but I tell them to basically relax. At that point, it's just, you've just got to stretched, keep focused. You can think about your dances and stuff. The day of the competition, I always make sure that they know what time we're going to be there, when I want them to be there, and when we start warming up. And I have a kind of a set schedule in my mind because I want them, warmed up, sweaty, ready to go when the first call is. And I don't like last minute, rushing in, trying to, pull numbers on and get shoes tied and all that stuff. So, I have a pretty good routine, and we start about an hour and a half, usually an hour and a half before. I want them there so I can see them and know that they're there, and mentally get prepared, get the parents away from them and start thinking, focusing on me and the dancing and the corrections, and, and stay in that bubble pretty much the whole day.
How do you work on extended high kicks?
Okay. I propose to the kids that they need to do a 10-minute drill. Okay, 2 minutes on a movement. So that would be 5 different movements for the week, and it can change. But high cuts are always on there. Usually shuffles are always on there. And then, maybe some of the other things that they're working on. Okay, so on high cuts, you have to practice high cuts every day, I think. You have to be able to elevate up off the floor. If you stick to the floor, you're never going to do a decent high cut. So you got to be able to get that lift up off the floor. And then the one exercise that I think is the best is the one where you do it on the back of your leg. You put your foot on the back of your leg on a bar, and you repeat extending and coming back to the same leg. And repeat, extend, high cut on the same leg. So it builds strength on that supporting leg that needs to get elevated up in the air.
And the other routine that you give them, or they're supposed to be practicing, is 50 sheds, 50 back steps, 50 shuffles, so on and so forth per day.
A repetition of the same movement, which is practicing basically, and doing it correctly, is another thing that, not just doing it 2 times and then moving on. You have to do it a lot because of that memory muscle thing and all that.
How do you keep high performing or high achieving dancers motivated if they hit a bump in the road?
If it's an injury and they're off, okay, for an extended period of time, I think it's important to keep contact with them. Just not let them be, out of the routine for 6 weeks and never hear from you. So you keep I try to keep in contact with them on somewhat of a weekly basis. How's it going? What are you doing? So that's when there's an injury. Now, to keep them motivated, if they've had gotten to a couple competitions and have had either bad results, they danced well, but they had bad results, or they danced bad and had bad results. You have to, decide. You look at it and you say, okay, what do you think your worst dance was? You talk to them and you just say, what do you think your worst dance was? Oh, I thought maybe the chanteuse was. Okay, well, let's work on the chanteuse. And then that next week or 2, you kind of spend the time working on that one dance that they didn't feel good in, maybe didn't place well in, and try to get it up to the rest of them. So it's a communication again, and seeing how they feel about the dances, because they all love the sword so much. That's the one they want to practice all the time. I know. So they'll never say, "Oh, I thought I did a great sword." Oh, okay. So it's communication and letting them know that you care about them and you're trying to, you know, and what do you think you could do better as far as the mental part of it. The mental part of it's a big part of the whole situation too. I mean, you can practice and, you know, do your very best, but if you have nerves, as Emma did, then you've got to, you know, try to calm those nerves or they're, you know, not going to perform very well. Mm-hmm. So you have to be a psychologist and a dance teacher and a part-time parent. You have to, you know, take all those roles.
How important do you think potential is versus determination?
Well, and as you know, as a teacher, and Emma is just a big, you know, starting out, but she'll learn that you have kids that you have all kinds of potential. Those are not necessarily the ones that are going to end up taking it all the way to the end. You know, it's almost too easy for them, or they're not, you know, motivated to practice or go to competitions or whatever. And then you've got these other kids that don't have the talent and they work like, you know, little beavers, you know, working on stuff, but you know, it's never going to happen. You have to find the balance. You have to find somebody, you know, I mean, I have been very blessed that I've, you know, have been given very highly motivated dancers that are willing to practice and put the work in. And, you know, that's the hard part right there, is getting them to practice. Now, and not everybody's got the same amount of talent. It's just how hard you work at it, I guess. You know, everybody wants the ones that are highly motivated and talented, but those are few and far between.
Emma, who did you look up to as a dancer? Did you have a mentor?
When I was younger, I was a really big fan of Morgan Bamford. I remember when I was, I think, 10, I got a hornpipe made by her mom, and my mom must have said I was a really big fan, so she sent a signed picture that I put up in my dance room, and I would look at it and be like, and it was of her doing a high cut, and I was like, that's how my high cuts are gonna look. I don't think they ever got there, but it was the inspiration that counted. And then locally, I always looked up to Linda's girls, Carrie, Lauren. When they would walk by at competitions, I would just, oh my gosh, Mom, look, they're here. And I would just watch them dance, and I thought they were so amazing. So yeah, those were kind of my big inspirations here.
Emma, what was the hardest thing for you to work on as a dancer?
Landing properly and using my thighs. And I'm sure Linda would agree that was not my strong suit. And that's why I had a lot of injuries, because I landed wrong for a long time. I just landed really stiff-legged. So Linda spent years trying to make me land and actually bend. And it, you know, that's kind of retraining your whole way of dancing. But once I think I eventually started doing it, and my injuries got less and the shin splints started going away, and it looks better. It looks weird if you're just jamming your legs into the ground. You can't dance properly like that. So that was the hardest thing that I actually just had to spend years and years until I actually got.
What do you do when you have little ones, primaries, to make sure that they're learning the technique and the movements correctly?
I, you know, start the technique right at the beginning. Start with the tight shed. Start with the second pointed toe. It's hard, you know. I mean, they can start young at 3 or 4, but they finally kind of start getting it. Usually right at the age 5, they start understanding how to point their toe and keep it tight on their leg and elevating and all that stuff. So I think if you start from the very, very beginning and teach the technique correctly, then it's a lot easier than trying to fix a bad habit that's been going on for years.
In the midst of this COVID pandemic, we're in unprecedented times, what are you doing to keep your dancers motivated, given that we're not going to have a championship in 2020?
That's really hard. It's almost, you know, if I feel like sometimes they need to motivate me too, because I try to, you know, be the cheerleader and say, okay, we got to work really hard, take this and use it to our advantage, that we need to work on things. And so the minute there's a championship or a competition to go to, that we're all ready to go. that we, haven't been sitting on the couch eating bonbons. This has been a test, I think, a big test for all of us. And hopefully we'll all come out of it and we're going to show up at that first competition and we're all going to look like world champions.
Yeah,
Wouldn't that be great?
absolutely.
We got to try to think of the positive. We can't keep dwelling on the negative, and we're just starting to come out of it now. So we got to be ready to go when it's time. And, we don't know when that is exactly, but just got to keep working.
Emma, what advice would you give to dancers?
I think if you're a dancer that's a high level and you're competing at, your national or world level, then even if you don't have a championship, you should still have that same motivation of practicing to want to better yourself. When you're not practicing, it is really hard to get back to where you were before. So, and I find it rewarding when, every time I'm practicing, I can feel when I'm getting better. Not just if I'm watching, I can feel when my high cuts are, full extensions and my potty bows are sharp by the end of the dance. And I think it's rewarding. And also knowing that it's a lot of time that you don't have anything else to do. There's no excuse why not to be practicing during this time. And, a lot of people probably are struggling to stay motivated. You don't want to be one of those people that when the championships start up again, it looks like you haven't done a championship in a year. You want to be one of probably not that many people that's going to be looking like you haven't missed a beat. And if you're not in it for competing and you're in it for the love of dancing, then hopefully championships or not, it doesn't make a difference. You can just find time to dance because you love doing it.
Obviously you've retired from competing at Cowell. How hard was that decision for you?
It was hard, and Linda and I talked about it a lot, but essentially I just don't think it was sustainable for me just because of an injury that I've had. And the last time I danced at Cowell was 2017, and I didn't do great. That was my first year in the adults, but that was one of the few championships that I wasn't really nervous. I had a good time competing and I was really happy with my dancing. And since I started competing after this injury, it's been a struggle. It's been really emotional. It's been just trying to get through dances, saying, well, if you have to sacrifice your half points, then just do that to get through it. And I didn't enjoy competing like that. I know that I'm not dancing the way that I used to, and I don't enjoy it the way that I used to. So I'd rather stop now, even though I would have loved to go back a few more times, because I've had really good experiences at Cowell. I never really had a horrible year. I enjoyed every year. I always thought I danced well. So I'd rather just, stop while I'm ahead. And then I'm really lucky that I'm in teaching now because I still get to stay involved. And then I would love to just keep working with other kids. And then if I get to bring a student there someday, then it would be great to come back that way.
Well, thank you, Emma and Linda, for sharing your stories and providing some inspiration to the teachers and dancers around the world.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Natalie.
Yes, thank you.